This camera. There you go. Say it again.
Enough mode, blue dog.
Excellent shot from that mode, everybody.
Yeah. The reason is more.
In balance, you mentioned player skill.
Yeah.
There's this thing. There used to be a guy who worked here,
Callus.
Vinny Sinatra. He was our QA lead back in the day in LA studio, and that guy could do things in a Gladius that I not see anybody else do. And it didn't matter what ship you flew. If he was in a Gladius, he could kick your ass. And that was the thing. Like the Gladius, the light fighter meta, the way that it just spoke to him. It was like this perfect match between pilot and ship. But you don't always get that. Sometimes people, they desperately want to fly. They desperately want to fly my Superman punching ship right here because it's the aesthetic that they want, and it has the role that they want, but it's not perfectly suited for who they actually are. And the comments that come from that are, oh, well, this thing is underpowered, or this thing moves slower. And like this, well, the answer is, well, maybe this ship actually isn't the one that was right for you. Maybe this other ship is the one. How do you incorporate that, and how do you manage that? This player preference and the player skill level. How does that factor into your balance plans here?
So it's really complex. So we start off with a shipping concept, and the team we work with.
Okay, so what I got from that was there was a pilot. He was very good. He was flying, clearly, the Gladius, which was much better than all the other ships at the time. Then he goes on to say, well, maybe you more belong to this ship. And I'm very genuinely trying not to feel like that is a marketing ploy. I understand that there are some ships that we gravitate more towards. For example, I love the Arrow. I love the Arrow. And I love the Mark II Hornet. I hate flying the Mark II Hornet. And I love flying the Arrow. Guess what? Both of them aren't that great in PvP. So what do I fly? The most hated ship I've ever had for the last 7 years, the Buccaneer. Because it's really good in PvP. And the M50. And I make that thing fly and sing and do all kinds of crazy stuff. You guys have watched me many times on stream fly these ships. Then this gentleman here says, oh, it's super complicated. I just showed you guys and proved to you guys that it's really not that complicated. It's balls in space. You need to tune via an algorithm. It's really that simple. Size of ship times velocity times G's equals deflection rate. Every ship gets an equal deflection rate, and then you tune for personality and top speeds. That's it, right? But I feel like this is gonna. Let's see what he has to say.
With the vehicle team and the drone crew, and we work with them on identifying the kind of identity of that ship and what it should be and what it will be in the game, and then according to that, we're building a certain character that we think suits that ship. It could be really fast forwards. It could have.
Okay, so this is an artist talking about technical things. Okay, so as an engineer, basically, of designing a fighter, it's like you go to Lockheed Martin and you say, guys, we need a next generation fighter, and Lockheed Martin says, okay, well, the next gen fighter is not going to have a player in it or a person. It's going to be an AI drone. It's going to have this. It's going to be this size. It's going to use this stealth plating. It's going to cost this much. And the contractor goes, well, I don't think it speaks to me, though. And the Lockheed Martin guy says, do you want to win a war or a fight, or do you want to have something that you can bring to a parade? Like, what's the point here? And we just heard the guy talking about, well, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't look this way. It doesn't, this and that. And this is what really frustrates me, because it's like, nobody should care how the ship makes you feel, right? You should design it based on technicalities and how the ship will function. And then after you've done that and you put ships in a good spot, then you start to add the feeling by the way it sounds, by maybe sometimes in certain situations its nose likes to kick up just a little bit. These kinds of small things about it, you can add superfluous personality to fighters, without sacrificing the technical engineering, I guess you could say, aspect of what actually makes something good and usable, right? Because what's happening is you have all these artists talking about how they make ships feel, and it's like your emotions shouldn't filter into the effectiveness of a platform, right? Because if you start doing that, then you start getting master modes where, well, the ship doesn't feel good, and it's like, well, of course, because, you know, you design it based on feel and not based on truthful metrics that really put ships in a good spot.
Have really good handling, or it's really slow and clunky. You know, we just don't know.
Okay, so to somebody's slow and clunky is somebody's fast and maneuverable, because it's not an objective thing. An objective thing is I have 10 Gs, I can move this direction this fast, my angular velocity is this, my acceleration is this, my profile is this, right? To me, the Buccaneer feels pretty snappy. It feels pretty responsive. To most people, they fly the Buccaneer and they go, this thing is a piece of garbage. And then you also have a bunch of developers, and I don't mean to be rude here, but who don't constantly fly because they're too busy on the game. And so their experience subjectively will make ships that are really hyper responsive feeling great to most players. To them will feel different, and they're the ones on the controls tuning ships, making them feel subjectively, which is different for every person. So you can't tune ships based off feeling and high energy and maybe I should go meditate and see how I feel about this fighter. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. You have to do it based off a very German approach. It's like a very, if this, then this is the numbers we're looking for. And screw your feelings. The feelings will come later once you actually get stuff in a good spot. Because people also, the more they fly the ship, will start to like the ship more because it's viable, because it's more capable, and they'll actually end up falling in love with the way it feels, instead of the opposite, where I need to feel great in the ship and then I'd learn to love it. It should be the opposite. It's like going to the gym and saying, I need to feel ready to go to the gym. Well, actually, if you just go to the gym and then start lifting weights, then you start feeling great. But if you wait to feel great and then do it, it ain't gonna happen.
But it depends on the ship. So we try and apply that, and then
yeah, they just said the feelings we're trying to apply that, like,
yeah, it just evolves from the loadout of the ship. It can depend on the weapons, or you know, or if it doesn't have the weapons to defend itself, what does that mean as well? You know, does that mean make it really tanky so it can't fight back, but you know, but it can sustain? But all those different things that we have, all the tools we have at this disposal, create what that ship is in the game, and then from that, the players themselves have choices within that ship what they can have as well. And we try and provide as much as we can to give the players to move the ship a little bit more in that place or that place, depending on what they want. But the ship always has a kind of window that it will operate in, and it might creep into other ships if if you have different components, stuff like that. But it's always got that core identity.
Yeah, so this is what's known as siloing, right? So if you create game mechanics, right? So here's what's happening. So this is silo number 1. This is silo number 2. This is silo number 3. Okay. These are your pop cans. Okay. Here's the light fighter. Here's, let's say they're all light fighters. Let's say ship 1, ship 2, ship 3. Okay. Now, ship 1 exists in this space. Its top speed is here. It maxes out here. It exists in this archetype. It does its things. It's tuning whatever, right? There's your Pringles can for a Buccaneer. Now, if you add components and you put the ship in a good spot, now your Pringles can looks like this, okay? It's slightly larger. The capability of the ship is slightly higher. Well, what if I want to complete a task over here? Okay, there's a task to complete here. I can complete the task because it falls within my Pringles can. All right. Well, I want to complete task over here. Well, guess what? My capability of my ship only exists in this space. So I have to bring a different tool for the job to be able to finish that tool for that Pringles can. Instead of making 3 Pringles can, 1 for fighters in general, 1 for fighter bombers, and 1 for I guess you could say heavy fighters. So heavy fighters, bombers, and regular fighters, mediums and lights, right? Mediums and lights, instead of having a giant Pringles can, and some fighters are here on the spectrum inside that Pringles can, some fighters are here, some fighters are here, some fighters are here, some fighters are here, and they all have really interesting ways and interplay. You know, obviously the Talon can still compete against all these other fighters in its class. They're all Gladius over here, Arrow over here, Talon over here, Saber over here, Hornet over here, and they all bring different aspects to the Pringles can, but they can all exist in a large space over here. And really the defining factor as to who wins is not so much the ship, it's the player and the fighter, like the old model was. But if the fighter starts to enter the Pringles can of the bomber, there's only a very small overlap. Let's say only one of the fighters, maybe let's say, oh, I don't know, the Talon has size 4 guns, so it's the only one that can kind of bleed into the bomber / heavy attack role. Or let's say the Mark II Hornet, because it's got a bunch of guns, right? But Gladius, not so much, not so much. But in total, most of the light fighters are existing in this space. Okay? And Talon can kill a Gladius, can kill an Arrow, can kill all these other ships, and they can all have really good fights amongst each other. And really it comes down to the player instead of the ship. The blades over here, you know, this one gives you a little more cannon power, this one's a little faster, this one's a little bit like this. All of them have different kind of personalities. You're like, oh, this is really cool. Instead, we have 100 Pringles cans. And we have rock, paper, scissors, where instead of fighters, bombers, and heavy fighters separated into Pringles cans, we have Pringles can number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and each ship follows within these little silos. It has a minimum and a maximum capability. There are only so much things it can do. And so we have this ship will always beat that ship in that situation. This ship will always beat that ship in that situation. He's rock, he's paper, he's scissors. There's your game. And no matter if you have the best pilot in the world, you can't beat this guy, even if he's halfway decent, because your Pringles can only moves this big. I can only exist in this limited space, right? And so instead of them giving personalities to ships, they've hamstrung our experience so dramatically that each ship is now completely at odds with each other. Each ship now can only really do one thing. It can do that one thing very well, but it can really only do one thing. Right? And this, my friends, is BS. And this is what we have right now. Okay? Hopefully, with the flight model coming out soon, it will change these things. But in order to change that, there has to be more emphasis on the agency, player agency. So this fighter here should still be able to engage competently with this fighter here. So an Aurora can kill a Mark II Hornet if the Aurora pilot is skilled. And because its Pringles can now is much larger, okay, and my skill allows my Pringles can, so my skill is represented by the red line, okay? So my skill, the maximum capability of my Aurora is this, and the pilot that I'm playing with, his skill level is about 80% of what the maximum capability of that fighter is, okay? And then we have Mr. Hornet here, whose maximum capability is way out here, but the skill of our pilot is only here. Then our Aurora pilot is going to kill our Hornet pilot. Because even though the Hornet can have a capability outside of the Aurora, because we have a much larger space to play in, because we have higher speeds, more skill-based gameplay, more decisions, more throttle control, more trigger discipline, all those things, now we have a game where ships of lower caliber still have a chance to kill the more, I guess you could say, expensive, better, quote-unquote, fighters, right? So them talking about not doing it based off of empirical evidence and engineering and technical stuff. We're doing it based on how the ship feels, which is completely subjective and individual for the person. It's not based on numbers or metrics. I think it's just...
And sometimes that's not going to align with each individual player and what they want it to be. And that's not a balance issue. That is just, that's a thing that happens when you've got a game with 200 ships. It's if I could fly around in any ship and be an ultimate fighter, I'm going to speak about me personally here. It would be the Mantis. I love the aesthetic of the Mantis. I think the Mantis could have been the coolest damn fighter ever. And that's not how it was built and whatnot. And I've tried the few times I still get into the game and whatever. I always try to fight, Mantis, and I struggle, and that's just because I love the aesthetic of it so much. I want that stuff like that. So, but it's one of those things. It's like that's not a balance problem. No, that is simply that ship is not meant to do the thing that I want it to do, and I always have to kind of remind myself.
In the old model, I would take Mantises and I would win duels, and I would take on multiple engagements in a Mantis and still be able to win. The Mantis was tons of fun to fly, and now all it can really do is interdict somebody and run away. That's really all it can do. And this is an example of taking away the agency of the player. You've now stripped the human being from their ability, to mitigate situations and to be able to engage, because there's just so many limitations on the platform now that you're only relegated to doing that one job, right? And this is the tragedy of master modes and what we have now.
There's like a good analogy. There's is from there was a German World War II ace which was called Adolf Galland, and he flew the Focke-Wulf 190 and the Me 109, and although one of them was better, like the Focke-Wulf was a lot better in terms of the stats, he actually preferred the VF or the Me 109 because it was just better in handling, and it just speaks to the characteristics of the ship. The ship have the characteristics. It might not be the right ship for you. Maybe you just focus so much on one ship that your muscle memory is all aligned with how this or that ship should handle, right? But this is why we have different ships, right? These are just different. Well, they give you different access to the universe. Maybe.
Yeah, but a Focke-Wulf can still shoot down a BF-109, and a BF-109 can still shoot down a Focke-Wulf. And in the hands of an expert pilot, you're going to take those wins, right? Obviously, the Focke-Wulf has a stronger engine, it has a better climb. The BF-109 has a better dive, has a better turn rate, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, it's like the argument between the Arrow and the Gladius. In the previous flight model, it was a real discussion, people were I don't know which one's better. Arrow's got some advantages, Gladius has some advantages, but it's pretty close. It's really hard to say 10 Arrows versus 10 Gladius is definitively what's a better fighter, because there are so many things the Arrow brings to the table. And now in master modes, they've stripped that away. The Arrow is just definitively worse than the Gladius. The Gladius wins 10 out of 10 times when it's a 5v5, right? So I'm really hoping that their new flight model understands this. I mean, Yogi seems to understand it, but who knows? Maybe Yogi's not the one making the decisions.
Maybe the handling is different, but then you have a big size foregun somewhere else. So
the second question I want, we've said already, and folks can you talk to us more about the flight model? We're going to do that in just a minute. This is my setup for that.
Okay.
We have done, Yogi, Rich, we have done a lot of these shows over the years. Whether it's here at SCL, whether it's on an ISC, or whether it's even a CitizenCon presentation that we put together and whatever. For a number of years now, we have said this next thing is our thing we're waiting for. Whether that was master modes, or whether that was hover mode before that, or whether that was operator modes, whether it's flight model, stuff like this. At various points over the course of StarCitizen's now 13-year development, it's been something or other that we're waiting on that unlocks the next thing. Now, and along that, it's been armor penetration. And it's been recently, we put flight blades in there, and that allows you to tune things like this. We know that crafting is coming up. Crafting is going to dramatically change how so many of these ships go, because now you're going to be able to build some version of these ships and affect their characteristics in the one that you buy.
Okay, we need to talk about this real quick. So here's my issue with crafting. Because if you design a game, okay, like we were talking about the Pringles cans, right? if you make it so that you're locking the max capability of your Pringles can, so this is your fighter. This is the maximum ability. It can only, perform up to here and as low as here. Okay? And now you're locking crafting and saying, well, with crafting, your Pringles can be this big. This is a huge problem because now you're locking meaningful capability behind a paywall, whether it's being in-game paywall or not. And my argument has always been allow for much larger Pringles cans. Okay. Right. Which means, again, with higher speeds becomes a larger Pringles can. The skill is much higher, right? So the maximum capability of a fighter is up here now, and the minimum is here. That's where you start, right? Everyone starts at the minimum. So if you have crafting in, instead of making the Pringles can larger in terms of its capability, right? Instead, with crafting and all that stuff, make it deeper. There is a maximum capability for your fighter, okay? And with crafting, you should be able to craft certain components at the expense of other things. But instead, I feel very strongly that CIG is just going to make the ship better in every way. And my opinion is a skilled pilot is going to be like, okay, I want to exist at this point. I'm going to sacrifice, like how we talked about with blades. So flight blades are a good idea, but it depends on how they implement it. Because if you take somebody and they're very skilled and understand how to fly, they're going to be able to sacrifice certain things about their platform to get the stuff that the ship is really good at in a much better place, which means the ship is going to be even better at the role. So if the role is the Pringles can, it's going to be able to excel at that role much better. Okay? But it seems like CIG is just going to be like, okay, if you have blades on, the ship just is better in general, right? And that, I think, is a real problem because you shouldn't lock capabilities behind component and skill walls, because what you're doing now is you're devaluing the skill required to get the most out of your ship, and you're offloading skill in exchange for money and components. And guess what game follows that trend? EVE Online, right? So a game that offloads skill and controllability and flight skill, input skill, situational awareness, throttle control, trigger discipline, all those things. If you're offloading that to monetary components, you're taking that away from the player and you're putting it on something that doesn't require skill or training. And so what you end up creating is you end up creating an EVE Online 2.0 situation where, you just get into lots of situations where it doesn't matter how good you are, like your max capability ends here and you need it to be up here. But like you literally just can't get there because you need to go buy components to get there.
We're selling the stock versions, and people are going to be able to craft their own individual versions.
Right. So the stock versions will be the small Pringles cans, and the ones that you quote unquote upgrade or whatever are going to be so far ahead of the stock versions, and no amount of player skill is going to be able to mitigate that gap. And this is a huge problem because the philosophy that CIG seems to be going with right now is offloading player skill at the expense of components and gear. And I think that is a disastrous way to set up your game. I do not think they should do this. So you heard it here first that I predict that unless they bring the depth and skill back into the movement and the flight of the game, that we're going to turn into essentially a manual kind of controlled version of EVE Online, where as long as you have the basic instincts to point your nose towards the target, that pretty much should be as deep as your flight skills are going to get.
And some level of customization will go into that. Is it futile to try to do any balancing along the way? Is this just a waste of everybody's time to try to balance heavy fighters, to try to balance light fighters when you know there's so many outstanding systems still coming?
No, so I'd say it's part of the journey. And let's say we throw away everything tomorrow, we still have what we've learned along the way. And that's really important because we're constantly learning. It goes back to you earlier. I've been here 7 years. And my understanding of the game and the game mechanics has fundamentally changed in that time. And as we've built more systems and we've added more to the game, and we do know the game's not complete, but it's kind of exciting because we're building towards that, and we're always moving in that direction and learning more and getting better, hopefully, at what we do. So we change things along the way, and then we have other systems that come in and they might throw a curveball in that, system that we've made. But we're learning along the way to build what we think is the best game.
Yeah, I think I can add something on that from a different perspective, because I've joined the team roughly around 2 years ago, so not a long time as these other two veterans, right? But it's very important in order to, you as a game designer in my case, but in general, I think as a developer, to have that knowledge and being able to have that experience in tuning and getting accustomed to the game, getting to know how the game is working currently. Also to understand, first of all, what can you do and what can you plan to improve the game in the future, in the long run, and also be prepared for that when the moment comes. You know what to do, you know what to expect, you know what to manipulate in order to create the right experience, right? So it's never a waste of time, and also I guess you guys want to play as well the game, right, from time to time. So playing a game that is in a better state probably is better than just a game that is not balanced at all in it.
I think there's often, over the course of the 11 years I've been here, I continuously encounter this expectation that every answer is supposed to be figured out before you start making the game, and before you start building, and that's just not how.
I don't think people are expecting that, but I do think people deserve to know a general direction. And I think, especially with Flight, it has been a boat with no rudder for a long time. And I think, a lot of people who do play the game on a regular basis can see where to go in a much more clear way. And I don't think people are saying, hey, you got to get everything figured out, but like you've got to get in the ballpark. And they were close with the old model, and then they just swung for the fences, and we're not even in the same league anymore. So yeah, people are frustrated, and I think that's a bit of a rude statement to be like, oh, people should have it all figured out by now. I don't think anybody's saying that. I've never heard somebody say that, but I think people deserve to have a basic direction with Flight, and it's been rudderless for so long.
How game development works. It's construction, not development. But it's always, from the player perspective, it is always incredibly challenging, because we have backers, we have players, we have citizens out there who want desperately to believe in us. They want desperately to believe that we know what we're doing. They want desperately to believe that there's a master plan and stuff. And the reality is that we know what we're doing and there is a plan, but those things change. We know what we're doing, but we...
Okay, so if you say there's a plan and then you say it's going to change all the time, like, I mean, I guess, but...
we learn more along the way.
Jared's correct in that we really want to believe in them. Like, I really do want them to be successful. I really, really do.
And those things that we learn change our perceptions. They change our ideas
and that's good
along the way.
Like dumbfire torpedoes.
We have that plan, and then new systems come online and stuff, and that plan has to change and it has to evolve and stuff like this. And it's never an issue of not knowing what we want to do or not being able to do it. This is what game development is.
Okay, well, that's not fair, because you literally had it from the dev himself that they're not really sure where they want to put these heavy fighters and all that stuff, right? So I just don't feel like that's genuine.
This constantly evolving, never-ending.
Like, I feel like this is one of those kind of toxically positive things where it's like, oh, we're always learning. I get it. It's good to be positive, but sometimes it's good to be like, okay, we made a big mistake and it didn't work out the way we thought. That would be nice to hear every once in a while.
A thing to find this thing that we're all trying to build together. There's Chris's vision, there's Rich Tyrer's vision, there's your guys' vision, there's everybody's vision, and it's about synthesizing that vision along the way. And
Okay, that's not true. So it's Chris's vision, and we're all along for the ride, and we're only helping Chris make sure that his vision gets accomplished. If our opinions mattered, a lot of stuff would be different. To say that it's all us making this thing together is just not true. We are part of this together, but make no mistake that our opinions are not going to be taken into account if they go against the vision that Chris Roberts set out. Because we do not share different visions for the game. You know, we follow Chris's vision, unfortunately, right? And that's why we had master modes.
it's going to change, it's going to evolve, and it can be very frustrating, both for player and developer alike. And it's just, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I feel like I want to acknowledge that.
I don't think that the vision has changed a lot, though, right? No. I mean, like, the one thing you can't...
See, this is why I fucking love Yogi, man, because he just says it straight out front. Yeah, vision hasn't changed, guys. Chris is still the one putting it together.
Underestimate is like engineering and design and development. It just takes time. Like, I mean, like, seriously, like 90% of all the things that player proposed that we should do better, we usually thought about these already, right? Because this is what we're doing for a living. But it just takes time to implement these. If somebody tells me, oh, please add an altimeter or something like this, then there's 15 different problems we need to solve. It's a lot.
Yeah. And those are the easy part as well, like, because a lot of time player.
So here's my rebuttal to that. And this is what's always been really frustrating to me, and maybe it's been for you guys too. But if Yogi's saying, hey, I want to solve this problem and I don't have the time, why doesn't Yogi have like 30 devs working for him? Why do we have 200 artists? Why can't we hire, 20 devs to basically work under Yogi and say, look, I need the altimeter done. Let's make it happen. I'm going to give this to you 5 guys. Like, let's go. You know, I never understood that. I never understood that. If you're struggling with time for these critical game-defining mechanics that literally underlie the entire experience, like, why are they not putting those guys? Okay, if it's money, Ascendian, like, why don't we cut some money from some other things, drop down on some of the other stuff, and focus on the stuff that really matters, and that is the core gameplay. I never understood that.
I have very interesting insight and ideas about very complex systems that we can potentially put in place, but those touches such a vast amount of other features in the game, and organizing that type of work and getting everyone on board and from completely different teams, especially in a company.
Yeah, Ascendian says they prioritize art. I think that's always been one of their difficulties. CIGs, they have amazing art, which also helps sell them ships, but it's getting to a point now where they gotta chill out on the art and they gotta start really like getting the core game in a good spot.
Of the size of CIG, it's very difficult, right? But in general, it's very difficult in video game making, so it's not a unique problem for us.
No, but being difficult is what makes it worth doing.
Yeah, we've got we've got a very complex game, but that's very exciting because we are doing it different. All our systems are real systems. They function, they work, and they do real things based on real, physics mechanics that happen. And
Most times. There's a few exceptions.
Yeah, there's a few exceptions here and there, but most of the time that works really well for us because it's a really complex problem to solve. But actually, it makes StarCitizen, I think, really unique for us. And it makes it really fun to work on.
Yogi's like, yeah, we usually 90% of the time we've usually had that
That's probably a bit
conversation.
high.
He goes, there are still plenty of times where we're being completely honest, where an idea has come from the community.
Right, Zums?
Like,
yeah, we talked
we've been
about that.
Like, oh, well, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I had it first, right?
Yeah. No. I agree with Das Wheelie Cool 69420.
Yeah, man, fucking bargain. $20 guys, $4. Get like 40 of them, can't.
That's a thing to do. I would just call that a
No, but I mean, we all are we've all seen like similar media. We've all seen similar films. We play StarCitizen because we probably like Wing Commander or Star Wars in the past and so on, right? So there is a common understanding. Star Trek, right? Yeah.
Too soon.
Yeah. So I think even of some things where we would say, oh, we had this idea, it probably just came from somewhere else. We incorporate a lot of community ideas in the designs as well.
Yep. Yeah. All right, so at this point, we're about halfway through the show, Yogi, so I'm gonna turn it over to you. This updated flight model. This updated. Now, obviously, when the time comes, we'll probably do an ISC or something on it. But give us the lowdown on what this is and what it will entail and what you're doing right now.
Okay, so
I'm just gonna go get a drink if that's cool. Just there we go.
Okay, so following the master mode release, we listened to we read the community feedback and.
Holy fucking shit!
Didn't.
Let's be real honest here. So there are 3 levels of anything that sort of happens in StarCitizen at any given time. Every time a patch comes out, one is we've put a thing out there, it's working as intended, and that is either great or we learn a lesson. Yeah. We learn a lesson, and it's like with master modes and whatever. It's okay, well, it changed things, and that's as it should be and whatnot. And I'm proud to say that I can honestly say that's what happens most of the time. Then there's the second scenario where we do a thing, we put it out, and it doesn't work the way it's supposed to because of a bug. There's some other competing system that it integrated into our work, and suddenly like it worked great on my build and here, and then it got into everything else in the PU, and it doesn't work right. Some underlying system is screwing up. There's some rare use case that is being used to exploit it, whatever. It's like, it was like, we wish it's like it kills us because this thing we just put out doesn't perform exactly the way that we wanted it to because of something that was out of our control at the moment.
Fire missiles.
And then there's the third one where sometimes we typed a 7 and we meant a 9.
Yeah.
And that goes out there and you're like, wait, why is that doing that? And it's like, oh no.
That was me.
Oh no.
Usually it's our fault.
Yeah,
this time.
Oh no.
But we have very tiny keyboards, so it's like we need just bigger ones.
You know, and it's one of those things like, sure, you might not hear an admission like that at EA or Activision or whatnot. I guarantee you it happens everywhere. But yeah, we're human. We're human, and sometimes we do those things. Those things happen more often than not. There's a number of times, like you just said, Mateo, where we're watching a streamer or watching a YouTube going like, that's not how that's supposed to go.
Yep.
Torpedoes.
Oh, no. I mean, we had a case of something similar just with with the 4.2 release, like the ground turbulence.
Oh, the ground turbulence
was meant to be in there for 6 months.
Not
didn't
bad
notice
so far.
that there was a bug in the noise generator. Well, it wasn't really a bug. It was just me not being careful enough, right? Where it basically did not work on live environments because the time difference is bigger, right? Because in our environment, in our dev environments, it's the time since we started the game. In the live environment, it's the time since 1970. So
yeah, the variable was too large in order.
Yeah, so the value was too large for the noise generator to actually give us a value.
Yeah,
it was working for us, and
it's great. Works on my machine.
Yeah, it works on my machine.
But this happens.
There are people out there who will take admissions like that and stories like that as some indicator of not being professional or not knowing what we're doing, whatever. And if you're choosing to take it that way, you know, God be with you. You can do whatever you want.
Translation: F off.
I prefer to always present our stuff as honest and as human, as like that. We make mistakes just like anybody else, and we have our share. So does everybody. I think maybe we're just a little more candid about it sometimes.
Yeah, but thanks for pointing out. Like for us, honestly, especially these days in DPU, we tend to keep up with. Try to keep up with a lot of feedbacks and data, even from the community run tool as well, right? So. Guys keep, shouting and letting us know what is not working, and we haven't.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's not just the content creators and stuff. Issue council.
Yep.
Oh my God, can you imagine this project without issue council? This question's worded a little bit, but it's basically saying capital ships in atmosphere, WTF? Like everybody's seen the terrible, everybody's seen that Polaris or that Idris. You're trying to do a line of mine, you're trying to do a Stormageddon or whatnot, and it's just it's just capital is an atmosphere. Any hope?
That's quite of a ship of Polaris, by the way.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
This was basically the role model for the players.
Okay, so I know what you want to say. Okay, so the vertical thing, right? Where ships do this.
Right, Forgotten Hero.
Nobody wants that, right? CR doesn't want that. Like he had a talk with me last week, right? But this is also something we probably will only fix with the new flight model. I don't want to say, oh, it's going to be fine in the future, but it is the plan for this, right? So right now, when you're in atmosphere, we have something called thruster efficiency curves, and the efficiency of your thrusters goes down by about 50% in the highest case. In the future, that efficiency will be much, much lower. So what you can expect that if you have a ship, let's say, give me a ship with VTOLs, I don't know, Cutlass, right? Let's say Cutlass, yeah. So if you have the Cutlass, right? You can expect that when the Cutlass, the Cutlass is like a light transport, so it will not be as punishing probably. But let's say, does the Aegis have VTOLs? Aegis have VTOLs?
Yes, but they don't work in game. But
okay, cool.
They will do.
Okay,
Does the Aegis have
so
VTOLs?
let's say the Aegis is landed. Then you will get a message on the heads-up display that tells you what your thrust to weight ratio against gravity is, and if that ratio is below 1, you will not be able to take off. And this is then just taking account the mass of the ship, how much it is loaded on it. So if you have your cargo full of lead cubes, let's say that, right? Then it is possible that you will not be able to take off. So now
It's possible, not a guarantee.
it's not a it's
You can overload.
you can overload and then you will not be able to take off. I mean, you may try to boost, because boost gives you like vertically, I think like something like 35% more thrust. You can put more power into your engine, so you get this natural resource network-based buff in your engines, but you will have a hard time just hovering like this, right? And at the same time, because these are your strongest thrusters, but your retros are usually a lot weaker than the other thrusters. So if you do this, you will eventually just sink down. That's at least the plan, right? So you can expect that larger ships will be harder to fly and to land in atmosphere. We will try to give players helpers so that new players don't just like crash land this thing, right? But still, like there's still physics, and like the reason why the ships can hover at this moment is because they have so much thrust that they can, because all they need to do is to be able to hover in 1G, or let's say on Earth, right? When that is not guaranteed anymore, then you automatically have like a more realistic and harder situation there.
And that's coming tomorrow?
That's not coming tomorrow. I'm not gonna, Jared. No when question. No, but seriously, like. We're really keen to put this over as fast as possible, but so the space flight model is done. The aerodynamic stuff is halfway done because the fly-by-wire is not completely done, and what we need on the control surfaces that's left is the ability of AI to use control surfaces. That's like a relatively complex project, but I'm confident that we can solve that in the next couple of weeks. And then there is the quantum experience. When all these things are done, and then it's the first time we can actually let players test this thing in a PU environment. But this is not for tomorrow, or also not for like...
Rich, you mentioned turrets earlier.
Yeah, turrets.
Are there any plans to make industrial ship turrets be a viable deterrent, or will they remain a mostly useless POS?
Slightly subjective question. It's
very
Subjective.
It's possible I'm adding my own spin to some of these things because I have feelings of my own.
Yep, so the whole point of those turrets is, the ships can't defend themselves with guns, so we've got turrets that, we want the ships to be able to defend themselves with turrets. We are working on the kind of general turret experience and how kind of powerful the turrets are as well. And we made some changes, was it last release? Yeah.
In general, like with the engineering
so we buffed them up.
Yeah, we buffed the ammo, we buffed maybe some regenerates for specific ships as well. So
That hasn't done all.
There's this other thing, like the thing that we're currently lacking is effective medium range weaponry. Right now, because a turret that fires projectile, just like it's just the,
like normal gun projectiles.
Is a gun projectile. The thing is like we don't want to twist like the projectile after we launched it, right? So what we need is like some medium range weaponry. We have a plan for this. Like we would like to try out flak at some point, but it's not ready for multiplayer yet. But it can range it can so it can be effective beyond the range where normal gun turrets are effective. I mean, I guess the question comes mostly from, oh, I have this large ship and I'm getting shot at by fighters which keep their distance. But the other thing is like
reduce fighter distance.
To more like Torsten's work concerning like the armor system and so on. There's also the question of like if smaller ships will actually be a danger for larger ships, because we are going to have like penetration parameters on the bullets, and we're going to have armor and so on.
We're going to talk about this after he's done.
Weapons that people use at the moment to damage larger ships, they might not be able to damage them in the future. It's like if you have a pistol and shoot at a tank, the tank says, well, okay, right? So if the ships want to do actual damage on the ships, they probably need to get so close in the future that they can destroy precisely the subsystems. But that's like, this is a little bit outside of like...
then that, of course, provides more utility to some of these heavy fighters or stuff that are designed to take on the larger ships.
Yeah.
Like the Ares, which
Exactly.
If you guys want the answer to that,
we are
fighters are going to
see if we
be
can
extremely
do at least
effective
one more,
as time
so
goes
I'm
on.
limiting you
to 1 second.
90 seconds.
I should not babble.
Answer, sir, because I want to hit more of these
We
things.
can go forward faster than we can.
Okay, so this is where we caught up to when I came in on stream when I started. Okay, so he's about to explain the new model. I'll explain it for you guys here so that you understand where they're headed, and then we can decide if that's something that you guys think is really cool. I think it's pretty cool. I think in theory it's much better than what we have now. But again, like master modes, it depends on execution. CIG's issue has always been, it's never been ideas, it's been execution. Their execution on stuff has been legendarily like underwhelming, right? So how it works right now is you have your space to move in, that's SCM. And then you have Afterburner, which is the second speed zone, which is more asymmetric. Your SCM is symmetrical, so you can move in any direction you want and you can hold your speed. But because it's such a small zone to exist in, like you just basically can't create deflections, right? And then obviously all of this zone here is your Afterburner, so I can move forward in a really fast way. But if I point my nose anywhere off center from where I'm headed, I start to dramatically lose speed, right? So I can only fly straight, essentially, if I'm trying to reach my top speed. In the new model, from how he'll explain it, is we are now going to have one speed zone, and that speed zone will look like this. Okay, it'll still be asymmetrical. Okay, so it looks something like that. My ship sits in the center. I can move forward at, let's say, I don't know, they didn't say what the speeds are. They just said we're going to drop accelerations a bit. So accelerations on our laterals will, like the Gladius will probably go from 10 to like 6.5. Main thrust will go down to like maybe 14 Gs or 12 Gs, which is good. You want Gs to be a little lower on the smaller ships, but again, you want them much higher on the bigger ships. Let's say, for example, they're going to give us 450. Our reverse will be 300. So obvious, and then our sides will be, I don't know, 400, right? Okay, so that's the new flight model. Now, there is no speed zone, because if I take my missiles off, okay, if I take my missiles off, if I take my cooler off, one of my coolers, if I put lighter components on, if I take my bomb racks off, if I strip one of my guns down or put on lighter weapons, then my speed will go from 450 to 500 or 550. So depending on how heavy my fighter is, it'll depend on how much speed I get, and depending on how much power I pump into my system. So if I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 power blocks into engines, 2 power blocks into my shields, 3 power blocks into my weapons. So engines, shields, weapons. Okay. If I put all that power in those components, then I get my maximum output. Okay. Now boost is going to allow us to reach these speed ceilings much quicker, but Afterburner is going to be a thing of the past, which is thank the Lord Jesus for this. My God, so needed. It's not even funny. And the fact that power allocation and weight of ship will dictate top speed. Okay? Now, ships will still have a maximum speed. And so what's going to end up happening is people will go, what's the unladen max speed of a Gladius? Oh, with full powered engines, she can reach top speed of 550, right? And people will look at that and be like, awesome. But she fights at 500. She can reach 550, but she fights at 500. Because when I take 2 of my pips off of my engines, I go down to 500, and I put it into my weapons, right? I put all my gunpowder into my weapons. Now I get all my magazine capacity and all that stuff, and I'm a little slower. Because in order for me to charge my guns and engage, I'm going to be engaging at 450, 500, right? So you're going to have an adaptive speed zone. Also, if I put torpedoes on, missiles, bombs, racks of fucking size 3 and size 1 missiles, double components, blah, 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 well, now I'm probably going to be down to 400. So loaded, the Gladius will fly at 400. Unladen, will max out at 550. For example, what that speed is, I have absolutely no idea. Okay? This will create an environment in which a heavier fighter, let's say, I don't know, a Hornet Mark II. A Hornet Mark II, so I'll keep my engines, weapons, and power here. So let's say I have a Hornet Mark II. My top speed for the Hornet might be 400, okay? Because she's a little heavier. But because I have really strong main thrust, maybe the thrusters on a Hornet are just much stronger, I can move forward at 500, just like the Gladius, right? So if I'm not carrying missiles and I'm not carrying other ordnance and I'm carrying lightweight, non-laser based guns, for example, like ballistics, now I can reach a speed in the Hornet of 550. Now I can catch the Gladius and fight it at those speeds. I can force the Gladius to take a fight he might not want because I have made different choices on my ship. Now, the real issue comes in, like I said before, execution, right? If they keep the speeds around 220 and unladen ships are only going at 300, the game is going to feel like fighting inside a phone booth. I'm going to tell you right now, if the SCM speeds aren't well above 450 into the 500, almost 600 meter per second marks, this flight model will feel like shit. And I'll say it again. If the speeds aren't in the 400s up to the 550s, almost 600s for the really fast ships, this flight model will feel like shit. Okay? And on top of that, they have to reduce the velocity of weapons because right now the weapon speeds are way too fast because any movements you do to create deflections kind of meaningless because you can just shoot at them almost like it's hit scan. Weapons are way too fast. And not only are they way too fast, but they're way too long range. Okay? So whatever the weapon balance for this new flight model is going to be, it must have weapons that are no faster than 1400 meters per second or slower. Because if you have weapons that are 1800, almost 2000 meters per second, you're going to be clipping people from so far away. If I was CIG, I would say light fighter, medium fighter weapons only reach 1000 meters. End of story, right? Anything past that and the weapons just don't go past that range, right? 1400 meter per second weapon velocities with 1000 meter ranges would make guns feel way better. Way better. And then they're also adding what's known as jerk, right? So I'm going to explain jerk for you guys because a lot of people don't understand what jerk is. So, for example, I want you to put yourself in the seat of a Gladius, okay? So what this is going to look like is, let's say I'm in the seat of a gladius, okay? And you've got your giant Giga Chad joystick with all the little buttons all over the place, okay? So here's your Giga Chad joystick. Here's the cockpit of your gladius. And you're fighting a gladius in the current build of Master Modes, okay? Now, you're fighting said guy, and his pattern looks like this. Okay? So what's happening is he's making a thruster movement to the right, then he's making a thruster movement to the left, then he's making a thruster movement to the right, and he's making a thruster movement to the left. Okay? Now, his flight path, because once he holds his boost down, you'll notice in Master Modes you have a little thing on your advanced HUD. So when your advanced HUD is up, you have this, like this. You've got your speed and weapons like that. And then in the bottom left corner, you'll have a little circle, right? Now, when you press your boost, that little circle goes up like this, like a counter goes whoop, right? And what happened is they've added jerk to afterburner / boost, but they haven't added jerk to constant motion. So what's happening is you press boost, and once that little circle fills up, well, guess what? Now you get 10.5 Gs. Now you've got the Gs. Now you go 10.5 Gs this way, 10.5 Gs this way. As soon as you ask for it, 10.5 Gs this way, 10.5 Gs this way, 10.5 Gs this way. Okay? So what happens is the guy lines himself up to you, and then he moves left, right, like this, and the ship instantly gives him that acceleration. And so the ship, relative to your position, creates these really jagged, really aggressive, snappy kind of motions. Okay? Is everyone currently following what I'm explaining here? Is anybody lost at this point? Because I'm going to tell you what Jerk's going to do to change this. So what's happening is the flight pattern that the enemy target is going to flow in is going to be much less jagged. Because these sections like this right here are where the acceleration of the thrusters are transitioning from a motion this way to a motion this way. And instead of getting instant Gs as soon as I ask for them, I'm thrustering through that turn, and I'm creating these kind of smoother, more predictable motions as I move from different position to different position. Right? So as my thrusters push me in this direction, and I start saying, I need to go this way now, the thrusters are going to transition from that side to this side, and it's going to go from 10 Gs to 5 Gs to 2 Gs to 5 Gs to 10 Gs. Okay? So it's like I over here, and in the course of, let's say, 0.8 seconds, my thruster goes from 10 Gs to the right down to 0 Gs to 10 Gs to the left. And so it's going to allow me to create a more flowing motion as I move through. Okay? And depending on the ship, it might have a 0.2 second jerk, or a 0.3 second jerk, or a 0.5 second jerk. So the snappiness, and so the length of movements might look like this for a gladius, and they might look like this for a cutlass. Okay, and for an arrow, it might look more like this. Okay, instead of the current mode that we have now in Master Modes, which looks basically like this. Okay, does everyone understand why that is so important? So again, great idea. It really depends on whether CIG is going to implement and execute on these ideas, right? So that pretty much sums up the new flight model. We're adding jerk. We're taking nav mode is gone. So how many times, show of hands, have you heard me saying if you're relying on nav mode, you're living in a crutch? Like you're giving yourself an advantage that is going to be taken away from you, right? Hitting your get out of jail free PvP switch is just a sign, I think, of accepting the fight is going to be a loss. So you just nav out, right? And this is also because because we don't have high enough speeds to genuinely be able to defend ourselves against multiple targets, we live in this weird world where once there is more than one shooter engaging you, you have no choice but to nav out because you cannot create enough deflection to meaningfully defend against multiple attackers. And so we live in this strange world where numbers are much more important than the skill of the pilot. And hopefully, if, fingers crossed, if they execute properly, the new flight model will allow us to have more space to fly around in at faster speeds. Accelerations will be tuned accordingly. And hopefully CIG will allow heavy fighters to have very strong main thrust and weak MAV thrust, and light fighters to have strong MAV thrust, but lower top speeds. So the ships are, light fighters are more capable of positioning themselves in fights, but they'll be limited in how long they can sit on top of somebody and kill them, because the heavy fighter will have slightly higher thrust, so it's going to be able to slowly get away from engagements. And this will allow heavy fighters to fly in formations like proper engagements. So for example, like how you guys see me flying the Buccaneer in master modes, where I'm not turning around like trying to take duels in the Buccaneer. I'm working with my wingman and I'm building my energy. I'm picking a target. I'm diving around, engaging, pulling through with energy, letting my wingman come in, engage. And then if he spins to engage him, he builds energy, he comes out. And by that time, I've already come around. And so you end up creating essentially like a figure eight where you're putting the enemy target in the center, and I'm diving in, coming around like this, and my wingman is diving in like this and coming around and back in, right? And so we're basically taking these passes on our target because we're using the energy that we can engage with, which is higher than the energy that the enemy fighter is engaging with. We put them in the kill box, we take runs on them, we look at where his nose is facing, we turn around and we re-engage. This strategy, this style of combat is what's known as bracketing, and it's what's been done in aerial dogfighting since 1917. So, the fact that people in the PvP community consider interceptors rats, or they're toxic, or, they're unfair because they're not man enough to take a duel, is like saying, why does the F-15 fire missiles? He's such a pussy. Why doesn't he engage with guns? Why does the F-35 have missile systems that stop radar? He's a pussy. He should just fight my F-16 with guns. It's just the most ridiculous, ego-centric kind of point of view. You have to use the fighter platform that you're engaging with in the way it was designed to be fought, Any idea of like honor and all this silliness is just a way for the human ego to keep itself protected from losing fights, I think, from my point of view. But I guess we'll have to find out.